Emily's brother, with a look of relief on his face, said just before their father's funeral began. I was troubled because he lived so long without money. Finally, he's gone, and I can breathe easy. What kind of thing is that to say? You owe so much to Dad. He even took on your debts. What's that? His prolonged life meant we had to spend so much on hospital bills and all. Finally, I can freely use his money, ha ha ha. I can't believe it. After all the financial help we've received from him. Shut up. Now there's no one left to take your side. Just leave already. You don't have to speak to your sister like that. Unable to stay silent, Tom spoke up to his brother, but their sister-in-law, Catherine, quickly commanded us in a dominating tone. You're married and left the house. You're a stranger now. He wouldn't be happy being seen off by a stranger, so leave quickly. Hearing Catherine's words, I reached my limit of tolerance. Not only do they speak ill of Dad, but they even dare to sever my connection with him. It was clear that Catherine was rotten to the core. Arguing with these people would be a waste of time. The funeral was about to begin, and I didn't want to spoil it by causing a scene. I wanted to scream, but I held back my words. Understood. Gritting my teeth, I somehow responded and gave up attending my father's funeral. While walking home, I vowed never to associate with these people again in my life. I am Emily, a nurse working in a pediatric hospital. I have been married for several years to my husband, Tom, a radiologic technologist. We met at work. Our jobs involve irregular hours, including night shifts and on-call duties, making it hard to synchronize our time together. But that's why we cherish every moment we spend together. A radiologic technologist's job involves taking images of patients' bodies. The images taken are crucial for diagnosis and treatment, making it a high-responsibility job. Missing even a minor anomaly could lead to a misdiagnosis. Every day, dealing with dozens of such cases, I face immense pressure. Despite the mental and physical demands of his job, Tom always faced his work with sincerity every day. I deeply respect Tom as a person. Tom fully understands how busy I am with my work. He respects me for trying to engage kindly with patients and their families. Before starting this job, I never imagined I could be of help to anyone. Nor did I expect to feel this happy every day. As a child, I didn't live with my father. He was working abroad for a major company, so he was away on solo assignments. Thus, my mother, brother, and I lived as a trio in Japan. In that life, I was subjected to terrible verbal abuse daily from my mother and brother. Didn't I tell you to clean up? You're such a useless bum. I'm thirsty. Hey Emily, go buy me a juice in 1 minute. In my family, my mother and brother were always the center. To them, I was probably just a shadow. My brother was treated with love, but I always received cold attitudes. Influenced by our mother, my brother naturally spoke to me in a commanding tone. He adored him but treated me like an unwanted object. Since childhood, I tried hard to be acknowledged by them. But no matter how hard I tried, they only looked down on me. When I was in high school, my father finally returned from his business trip. But the cold treatment from my mother and brother didn't change. My father tried to protect me, but instead of accepting his efforts, they criticized him. I've been protecting this house while you were away. You have no right to speak up now, after doing nothing all this time. The one who wasn't even at home suddenly playing the family man. Stop it! We've been living as a family like this, so don't start butting in now. The arguments between my father, mother, and brother never led to a resolution. Without reconciliation, their anger gradually turned towards me. To prevent their attitudes from worsening, my father stopped saying anything. My father, regretting that he couldn't change my situation, tearfully apologized to me. But just having my father by my side made me feel saved. Emily, you're not useless or a nuisance. You're an important family member. His kind words were a great support to me, who had been constantly denied existence by my mother and brother. They made me feel that my presence was meaningful. Despite the unchanging slave-like treatment from my mother and brother, just having my father there allowed me to stay positive. When I graduated from high school, my mother forced me to work and didn't allow me to pursue further studies. Meanwhile, my brother, who hardly studied, went on to a private university and just played around. The treatment between my brother and me was different, even in terms of education. My father, who usually didn't oppose my mother, protested this time. He respected my opinion and told me that I could choose my path. Until then, I had never really thought about my future. But my father's words made me start thinking about what I wanted to do. I decided I wanted to be someone who could help others and began dreaming of becoming a nurse. My father supported this dream by secretly helping me with finances, enrollment procedures, and arranging accommodation for living alone so I could attend nursing school. Thanks to his help, I was able to successfully enroll in nursing school. After my mother's death, I didn't return home, but kept in touch with my father. He warmly watched over me when I got my nursing job offer, passed the national exam, started dating Tom, and even when we got married. I was always concerned about my father living alone at home. But whenever I asked, he would say, "Don't worry," and continue to keep his struggles from me. One day, my usually stoic father mentioned he wasn't feeling well. Concerned, I strongly urged him to get a medical examination. My father underwent an endoscopy and informed me that everything was fine, which relieved me, but Tom still looked worried. Tom suggested that there could be illnesses not detected by an endoscopy, and it's better to get a thorough checkup, so I relayed this to my father. When my father's diagnosis came out, it was shocking news for us. The words pancreatic cancer weighed heavily on my heart. Fortunately, the disease was still in its early stages, and surgery was possible. My father was hospitalized for treatment. Visiting him after the surgery, he looked tired but showed us a gentle smile. Seeing his smile, I felt a bit relieved. However, this relief was short-lived as the door to the hospital room opened loudly, and my brother and a woman appeared. My brother glanced at us briefly, then ignored our presence and entered the room as if it were his own home. "Get out," he said coldly, then looked towards the door. The woman next to him, likely his wife Catherine, glared at us as if telling us to leave. I had heard from my father that my brother was married, but seeing her unpleasant attitude, I was sure she was his wife. "We just got here and we're still talking with Dad, you know," though I retorted. My words seemed to not affect my brother, who looked displeased. Does talking with Dad make his condition any better? That's not the point, but we haven't finished talking. Could you please wait a little longer? My husband also asked my brother, but his words were briskly dismissed. "So you're the guy who married Emily, a radiologic technologist, huh? Just a guy who can't do anything without doctors. Don't butt in." My brother said this mockingly to Tom. Despite us still being in the room, my brother started an unbelievable conversation with my father. "Dad, I got into debt again and need money. You'll help me out this time too, right?" Wait a minute. Angered by my brother's audacious and insensitive words, I couldn't help but speak out. He hadn't shown any concern for our father's condition upon arriving. Again implies this was a habitual exchange. "Brother, you should solve the debts you created yourself. How can you bring this up so suddenly? Do you even understand Dad's current situation? Shut up. Don't interfere. Dad is making up for the past to me, haha. Making up for what? For neglecting his important child back in the day. He never cared about me. Just focused on his work. Trying to make up for it with money now. Isn't that a great way to atone, haha? What are you talking about? I was shocked and at a loss for words by my brother's outrageous statement. I knew he was a terrible person, but I didn't expect him to be this selfish and irresponsible. Feeling that I couldn't let this go on any longer, I tried to find the words to respond when my sister-in-law Catherine glared at me with cold eyes. Why are you acting so high and mighty? You left this house, so just go home, stranger. Her words shook me deeply, and I lost my composure. I can't take this anymore. Unable to control my emotions, I ended up shouting out loud. Emily, calm down. He calmly stopped me, forgetting that we were in a hospital and my emotions were raw. Then, my father began to speak in a weak voice. Emily, Tom, thank you for coming. Let's talk again another day. As my father said this with a tired smile, my brother and Catherine showed a look of superiority. The reality of them being by my father's side deepened my worries. But feeling guilty for causing a scene in the hospital, we eventually left. A few days later, my father's condition became unstable, and he developed complications. This must have been a huge shock to him. He couldn't eat properly and became mentally and physically exhausted. Despite the doctor's efforts, my father eventually passed away. I couldn't come to terms with this sadness so quickly. Shockingly, despite my father's death, my brother and his wife did nothing, leaving all the funeral arrangements to Tom and me. There was no time to mourn properly. On the day of the funeral, as I was greeting the attendees, my brother began to speak with a smirk. He lived so long without money, and it was trouble. Finally, he's gone, and I can finally relax. How can you say that? Dad took care of you so much, even taking on your debts. What's that? His prolonged life meant we had to spend a lot on hospital bills and everything. Finally, I can freely use his money, haha. I can't believe it, even after all the financial help we've received from him. Shut up. Now there's no one left to take your side. Just leave already. You don't have to speak to your sister like that. Unable to stay silent any longer, Tom spoke up to his brother. But Catherine immediately commanded us in an imposing manner. You're married and left the house, so you're a stranger now. He wouldn't be happy being seen off by a stranger, so leave quickly. Hearing Catherine's words, I reached my limit of tolerance. I thought not only do they speak ill of Dad, but they even dare to sever my connection with him. It was clear that Catherine was rotten to the core. Arguing with these people would be a waste of time. The funeral was about to begin, and I didn't want to spoil it by causing a scene. I wanted to scream, but I held back my words. Understood. Gritting my teeth, I somehow responded and gave up attending my father's funeral. While walking home, I vowed never to associate with these people again in my life. The next day, my cell phone was flooded with calls from my brother and his wife. I had a good idea of their intentions, but I continued to ignore all calls. I thought my brother wouldn't know where I lived and would give up if I ignored him. However, he went to the extent of hiring a detective to find my apartment and showed up uninvited. I've been calling you so many times. Why aren't you answering? We had to go through so much trouble to find out where you live. As soon as they saw me, they started yelling at me nonstop. Before I could say anything, they continued with what they wanted to say. I heard from the lawyer. Is it true that you're getting all of Dad's inheritance? We're siblings, so the inheritance should be divided equally. Why does it have to be you, the sister, who gets everything? When I remained silent, my brother yelled, "Say something." They were the ones who kept talking without waiting for my response. They're incredibly selfish. It's as the lawyer said. I was surprised too, but that's the situation. You can't possibly be planning to take all of the 1 billion dads left behind. I won't allow such a selfish act. I don't need your permission. That's already a decided matter. Nothing will change, no matter what you say. You think you can talk to me like that? You've always been useless. And you did nothing for Dad in the end. You should just keep quiet and listen to me like before. My brother was still refusing to accept reality, trying forcefully to claim the inheritance. But it was clear that such actions were futile. After all, our father hadn't recognized him as an heir. Didn't you get the explanation from the lawyer? Dad has disqualified you from inheriting. Given what you've done, it's understandable, isn't it? What given what I've done are you talking about? Don't you realize you made Dad pay off your gambling debts, used his shareholder privileges without permission, and even sold his properties without consent? Dad had taken steps to ensure they couldn't inherit anything. Tired of the insults and harassment from my brother and sister-in-law? That's what you've done to Dad. I've answered your questions, so leave now and never come back. Initially, my brother and sister-in-law were shouting, but as they listened to my words, they began to grasp the reality. I could see their faces turning pale. I was about to return to my room, leaving them behind when my sister-in-law suddenly pleaded, "Wait, can't you share even a little of the inheritance?" I was astonished that she was still asking for such a thing. Despite my cold gaze, Catherine continued to speak. We bought a luxury apartment expecting Dad's inheritance. We borrowed money from shady sources, and now the repayment is due. The interest is high. We need to pay it off quickly. Please help us. Apparently, after Dad's death, they had been living a life of luxury, squandering money on gambling and luxury brands. That's your problem, not mine. Rejected by me, my brother panicked and yelled at me. You've always followed my orders. You should be obeying me now too. I'm not the same person I used to be. I stand on my own now and have changed since meeting a husband who respects me. I won't be controlled by you anymore. Don't belittle me, I shouted back at him, unable to contain my anger. At these words, my brother knelt in despair, still begging for help. Your brother is begging for help. Don't you want to help your family? Catherine's words only made me angrier. You were the ones who treated me like a stranger. Why should I help people who insulted Dad and denied our relationship? There's no reason for me to help you. How can you say such cold things, always acting so high and mighty? If you stay here any longer, I'm calling the police. Is that okay with you? No, that's... As soon as I mentioned calling the police, my brother and sister-in-law hurriedly left the scene. Later, at my father's 49th day memorial service, talking with relatives revealed their dissatisfaction with my brother and his wife. Their behavior at the funeral was inappropriate, and it was clear they had lost the trust of the relatives. After learning he had no right to the inheritance, my brother contacted our relatives trying to find my whereabouts. But when nobody would tell him, he resorted to hiring a detective. Realizing he couldn't get money from me, my brother then begged relatives for loans. Of course, they all refused, and he ended up fleeing to escape his debt collectors. Months later, my brother and sister-in-law were still on the run from debt collectors. Catherine was fed up with this lifestyle, but lacking the ability to be independent. She couldn't leave my brother. They must be living days filled with constant quarreling and resentment. As for us, we visit the grave once a month. I regret not being able to attend the funeral, so I want to make sure I visit my father regularly. Thanks to his support, I was able to become a nurse, meet my husband, Tom, get married, and now live a fulfilling life. I'm determined to live on without forgetting the gratitude I feel towards him.